Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our latest HashiCorp snapshot titled Secure Access to Host and Services with HashiCorp Boundary, which will be presented by Theo, our Senior Solutions Engineer at HashiCorp. So today, Theo is going to show you how Boundary provides a secure way to access hosts and critical systems without having to manage credentials or expose your network. And this is entirely open source, right? So before we get started, just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all, I would like to note that this session is being recorded and recording will be made available to you within the next day or so. We'll send you an email with the recording link, right? And secondly, if you have any questions at all during the demo or during the presentation, feel free to access the Q&A tab at the bottom, right? You can put your questions there. Our solution architect who's with us today as well, David, is going to answer these questions together with Theo as we go along, right? So in this case, let's go ahead and get started. Over to you, Theo.
Thanks, Eric, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and greetings from sunny Singapore. So let's dive right into this. Picture a user requiring access to a private resource. Say it's an internal database running on a private network. And the user is a database operator. He wants to be able to perform routine operations, right? A typical workflow for accessing systems goes something like this. The user is provided with the credentials so that they can log into a VPN server or a jump host. He needs to know the IP address and port of the target system that he wants to connect to. And he needs to log in, enter his credentials so he can perform the operation that he needs. So we've gone through this similar workflow on a daily basis. And there are a number of challenges with this approach. One, onboarding is complex. So administrator needs to configure multiple systems, onboard users, as well as distribute credentials to these new users, right? The workflow works well in a static environment. Furthermore, users are exposed to a private network and they need to know the internal network addresses. In a dynamic environment, applications gets moved to a different node. They get different IP addresses. Sometimes you have auto scaling and so on. So the workflow, excuse me, can be problematic as the environment gets more dynamic. And lastly, credentials are exposed. The user needs to keep these credentials. They need to remember them. And naturally, they put them in a most convenient place. And this is like a notepad, files, emails. And those are not necessarily the most secure place. These actions could create additional exposure of credentials and a risk to organizations. So how can we do better? So these are basically the problems that Boundary is designed to solve. With Boundary, users need to log in with the trusted form of identity. They don't need to use a specific set of VPN credentials, SSH keys, or for bastion hosts. They just need to use the same single sign-on that they are accustomed to. There is a catalog that shows what systems and services that users have access to. And this is done at a logical level with easy to remember names, no IP addresses, nor DNS names, right? And once they select an item from catalog, Boundary sets up connections to the endpoint in a seamless manner without them having to remember the credentials and key them in. So I just described how Boundary standardized the workflow for access of the dynamic infrastructure. The advantages is onboarding is simplified. We simply add new users to our identity provider or remove them from those providers. Boundary support your existing providers like Okta, ADFS, or Active Directory. Configurations to end target is automated in this case. So users don't need to be exposed to the internal network address and the network remains private. And because we are using logical services rather than IP level, it is easier for your targets to have more dynamic environment like auto scaling, failover, and some other dynamic changes. We don't have to worry about changing controls such as firewall rules all the time to keep pace. And Boundary keeps the credentials in a store. Over here, Vault is optional, but for organizations that already have infrastructure secrets managed by Vault, Boundary can make use of it as a credential store. All right. So in terms of how Boundary works, Boundary clusters consist of a control plane and a set of worker nodes. Users connect to the Boundary controller, and this Boundary controller knows what users under management, the targets under management, and it manages users' access as well as brokers the user connection to the Boundary worker, which then proxies it to the target system. Boundary controller also has credential store, as I mentioned. Vault is optional. If you have Vault to manage your secrets, then you can tie Boundary credential store to a Vault cluster. So in other words, Boundary can check out secrets from Vault and presents that to user. And sometimes you can inject credentials seamlessly into the user session. The Boundary worker is a target-aware proxy. So it proxies the connections to whatever target system via the protocol that you want, SSH, HTTP, database, and so on. And that's the red line that running along the middle there. Boundary doesn't need require on target agents. All the connections are managed through the Boundary worker. You can have multiple controllers and workers to provide scaling, and these can be deployed on various target platforms on-prem as well as cloud. And last, the connections in Boundary, connections between the controller, the worker, and the client are protected and secure. So I have a demo to show you, and the demo environment that I have is basically a Boundary server running on my local host. And also I have a Vault running as a credential store. I also have a set of targets in multiple locations, different cloud providers, as well as on my local system. So let's start with the demo. As an administrator, I'm going to log in as a web admin using this web admin console. The port that Boundary is open is 9200, and I'm going to log in using my username and password, but there's other authentication method that's provided, including the OIDC. Once I authenticate to it, basically I'm presented with my resources. These are basically arranged in a hierarchical order, starting with the what we call scope. There's one global scope and a couple organizations, including HashiCorp SG. Underneath this HashiCorp SG, I have a couple projects, Northwind ERP, as well as production support. And we can find the targets on these projects. So for example, for Northwind ERP, I have a Postgres SQL target, which is more suited for the analysts. And for the production support projects, I have numerous targets that I've described to you before, including the Linux servers and GKE and various databases. Other resources are basically users. I have users. I log in as one of them, which is admin. Currently, I don't have any groups, but basically this is a way of grouping users together. And more importantly, there's roles. Here, roles basically assign permission to either a user, which is me, or a set of groups. And the capabilities that it grants to the principals are described here in terms of, here we can see that we allow all kinds of actions on all kinds of resources. And there could be multiple grants that are given to a user or a group. So this is really the administrator point of view. If you are a user, you are likely going to use either a command line or a boundary desktop. So here I'm going to log in as an administrator on a command line so that I can have access to a range of things. I can do the similar thing using a boundary desktop. Right? And once I log in on the boundary desktop, I'm presented with the targets that I'm allowed to connect to and the sessions basically that are associated with those targets. And currently there's no active sessions. We'll go through this scenario. In fact, let's do that. Let's connect to one of these targets, which is a Linux server. And the way I do that, one of the ways I can do that is through boundary connect. Here I'm going to specify is a SSH. And notice that all I need is a easy to remember target name, which is set up by the administrator already, right? And with the username. And I'm gonna key in my credentials, and once I'm in, which is shortly, into this Linux server on AWS, I have a sessions connected, and I can see that session on my desktop, boundary desktop as well. So as you can see, there is one active sessions, which corresponds to the boundary connect that I just initiated. Any users that have permissions can control these sessions. So for example, I can cancel that, and that would basically destroy the connection. And this is also happen when users are removed from the boundary system. And so think of it like a break glass procedure. If the users get removed from the boundary, then all the active connections will be terminated. I want to demystify this boundary connect a little bit, and to do that, I want to show you how to connect. There's a various part to it, and there's basically I'm going to use this PSQL, the Northwind ERP database as a target. So this is similar to what I did before, right? The boundary connect, and basically the boundary connect, the first part of it is it opens up a port, a listening port on the boundary worker, which is also on my local host. And it asks for the boundary controller for authorizations to create this session. The boundary controller will, once it gives the authorization, the boundary controller also contact the boundary target, which is the vault credentials, and basically obtain the secrets. In this case, we want to use dynamic credentials that are only valid for these sessions, right? So, and these credentials will have a short lifetime and will be cleaned up, and so that we don't have to automatically by vault, and we don't have to remember about manage them anymore. So once I do that, then the boundary connect, then you can invoke a client and proxy the connections through this. Let me find my DB connections and key in those informations that I just got from the boundary connect. All right. And as you can see that I'm logging in as an analyst here. Once I'm logging, so I can see that I have access to the Northwind database. I can run a report as an analyst, but also I have a certain rights granted to me, which is read only. So I won't be able to make mistakes like deleting certain tables or destroying data from it, right? Okay. So let's run one more scenario where I want to connect as let's say there's a problem. I want to connect as a DBA into one of these same target. I'm going to go back to my command line, and here I can specify boundary connect Postgres. The same thing with the target name, and now is the target that is suitable for the DBA with the same database, Northwind database. Notice that here now the boundary connect, the user experience is more enhanced. In other words, that all these credentials, that users don't need to remember them. They don't need to key in. The boundary connect basically inject that automatically into the sessions. We can see that the connections, use the DBA, this DBA user, and this user has a super user rights attached to it. Okay. One thing I've forgot to mention is there is another way to control the target. So if I go back to my as an administrator, there is a way to further refine the control to the targets. So if I say go into the PSSQL DBA target, as an administrator, basically I define this target by attaching it to a set of hosts or a host. And more importantly, I can control the kind of connections, the sessions that are, that are attached to the target. So for example, the maximum duration here tells me the maximum duration of a session. I can put it, let's say, 1 second. And the other parameter is the maximum number of connections allowed per session. So normally we define that to be like 1, so that you don't reuse the connections, and that will force user to connect whenever they're done with their session. And lastly, the target is attached with the credential store. In this case, we're making use of Vault Dynamics secret credentials, and this is for DBA only. Okay, I think with that, I am going to go back to my show you the slide and show you the where does boundary, our plan about boundary, where do we go from here, right? So we'll be focusing on the seamless access. We feel strongly about identity-based control. So we'll support more identity providers. Additionally, we'll also focus on the integration with Vault or other credential management of choice. For dynamic host catalogs, we'll enable a plugin model to discover new services from infrastructure providers. So this is based on rules or filters that match them. In other words, you will be able to specify, for example, all EC2 instances that have certain tags on AWS to be discovered by and attached to the targets. More visibility into your session. So currently, boundary workers serve as a transparent proxy, but in the future, the boundary workers will support protocol decoding, and that would enable things like managing, introspecting session activity, and session recording. So we have a boundary available for you to try. I think the latest release is 0.6. It is also a OSS project. Here's the site that you can go and download the boundary. We also create a set of tutorials to make it easy for you to learn more about boundary. So try it and let us know what you think. With that, I appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the boundary, and looking forward to your input. Over to you, Eric.
All right, thanks for that, Theo. That was an awesome presentation and demo. We have a question in the Q&A tab from Chan. So he say that, is integration with AWS SSO supported to log into Boundary and assign roles with based on AWS SSO permission sets? That's the first question. Theo or David, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can try to take a stab on it. So basically, we are using a vault as a boundary, as a credential store, and that is the inherent capability with Vault, and not just for AWS, but also for other cloud providers.
Okay. And the second part of the question is whether we can use RDS DB Connect IAM authentication.
Let me think about that. So there's, I think in similar fashion, basically for each target, you can specify the credential store. In this case, we can use boundary to contact Vault, and Vault does support the IAM connections or IAM integrations. So I believe, yes, we can do that as well.
All right, that's great. One more question from Vincent about architecture. What type of infrastructure is required for making it work to access internal resources from the internet?
So there are a couple of ways here. You can still stick with your, if you're comfortable with the existing infrastructure, your VPN or jump host, firewall rules, you can put this boundary on top of this architecture, right? But also notice that the boundary here is very much a zero trust system, meaning that it does not rely on, it relies on identity rather than it being on an internal network. So either way, you can put a boundary on the existing secure network that you have, or you can have a boundary that's outside of that, still within your control, and and provide seamless access to your users.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Vincent. Now I can't see any further questions in the Q&A tab nor in the chat. So folks, if you have any questions, you may drop them in the Q&A. If we miss them, we will be sure to catch up with you over email to answer them. Yeah, and if you do have any other questions beyond this session, you can also drop us an email. You'll see the email address on screen right now. So just drop us an email there. We'll be able to respond to you. Oh yes, one last question before we go probably. Vincent has an add-on question to say how many servers is needed to be installed to use Boundary?
Right away, you need two types of servers, or rather components, right? The boundary controller is one of them. The other one is a boundary worker. You can provide. They provide scaling as well, so you can provide if you want to scale, you can provide as many boundary workers and controllers as you want. And sometimes you also need to put the boundary worker in locations that are close to your targets, and and provide scaling there as well.
Okay. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our session today. We hope you found it extremely useful. As I mentioned earlier, the session is being recorded. We will send you the link to the recording in an email soon, in the next 1 or 2 days. If you like what you heard today and would like to find out more about Boundary, feel free to visit our Learn pages. That's at learn.hashicorp.com. That's our website where you can find useful tutorials. Thanks again for joining us today, and a big thank you to Theo and David as well. Enjoy the rest of the day, and bye for now.
Yeah, bye-bye.